Nick Houston, and I'm the Director of Visa Australia, a solicitor, and also a migration agent. And I've been doing this job for the last 15 years, which is assisting people apply for permanent residence and also dealing with other visa situations, including review applications, refusals, appeals, and the whole range of work. Before doing this job, I worked for the Department of Immigration for 3 years, so that's my professional background. But really what we're here to do is to try and answer some questions that people have about the impact of the coronavirus on your visa situation in Australia. So, I mean, obviously events are happening so quickly that it's really difficult for everyone to keep up with what's happening, but we are able to collate some of the information and we'll relay that to you, but we'll also basically try and answer your questions. And what we'll do with the questions is that the ones that we can't answer in particular, we'll put them to our professional association, the Migration Institute of Australia, and they are meeting regularly with the officials from the Department of Immigration and to put questions to them about how a particular situation should be resolved. And what we will do is, when we get the response back from the Migration Institute, we'll put them onto Facebook, on our Facebook page, so that you can have, as decisions are made, you'll be able to keep up to date with what the Australian government is doing and how it's responding to people in different situations. So that is it. Please feel free to ask questions and I will try to answer them. Before I get on to the questions, I would like to say that Visa Australia has set up a free helpline, and we're happy to talk to people and have a short consultation. People will have a range of different situations that they're confronting, but what we'll do is to try and provide some basic information and let you know to what extent your situation is serious and that you may need professional help, or suggest how you can then approach the Department of Immigration yourself to have the matter dealt with. So we'll try and provide some steerage and guidance to people who have particular visa questions. So that's the Visa Australia helpline. Okay. Some generalities. So the Australian government has created the travel ban, and it's preventing people from coming into Australia who are not citizens or permanent residents or their immediate family members. There's some other exemptions. So long-term Kiwis who have been in Australia on a long-term basis are permitted to return, and also other provisional visa holders. And those cases are being decided on a case-by-case basis. So if you find yourself in the situation of having family members here and you're outside Australia but with a temporary visa, well, then you can actually apply to come back in despite the travel ban. Information about that is on the Department of Immigration's website. So although this travel ban is in place, there are some exemptions based on compassionate grounds underneath the travel ban. Okay. Putting aside the travel ban, visa processing is actually continuing as per normal. So the visa and the migration program is not closed. The only thing that is closed is the frontier at the moment, subject to those exemptions that I met. So if you are in the process of applying for other kinds of visas, skilled visas, graduate visas, further student visas, well, it's business as usual. Okay, the department is continuing to process those applications. Visas are continuing to be granted. Accrediting bodies are continuing to accredit people. State governments are continuing to nominate people. The only thing is, you can't come into Australia once you have your visa until the ban's lifted. So how long might this ban stay in place? Not certain, but it won't be forever. And in many cases, the visa process is so slow that by the time you've got your visa, if you're offshore, then you'll be able to get on the plane and come into Australia in the normal course of affairs. Okay, so what is the Australian government saying about it? And the messaging from the department is that it is trying to be as flexible as it can with dealing with people who are caught by the coronavirus. As you know, to apply for an Australian visa, it's a legal process under the Migration Act, and the rules are quite detailed and prescriptive, and the Department of Immigration cannot not follow the rules, okay? So to an extent, the flexibility that the department has is limited, but within that context of the Migration Act, in many cases there is a discretion given to case officers about how they should interpret a particular requirement. For example, the great example is the genuine temporary entrant requirement that student visa applicants and also visitors are subject to. So the department has said that it will be as flexible as it can in dealing with the discretion that it has to decide those applications. So in a sense that's good news, and that is possibly the best approach that the government can take without going back and formally amending the Migration Act, which is fairly complicated to do, particularly when the Parliament is not sitting. Okay, the other message is from the Australian government and from us as well is whatever you do, do not let yourself go unlawful in Australia. So there will be people who whose visas are expiring and you can't get out of Australia because you either can't get back to your country or you can't get through through the United States or something to get back to your country. So there will be certain people who are in effect trapped in Australia by that situation, whose visas are expiring. If you go unlawful, well, firstly, you're subject to detention, and in fact there's a legal obligation on the part of the Australian government to detain you, and that wouldn't be very nice. But the other thing is that you're making it more difficult to later apply for another kind of visa. The system does not like it if people go unlawful, and they put restrictions on applying for other visas in Australia. So you don't want that either. If your visa is expiring, you may be able to apply for a visitor visa, okay, and then with the discretions that the government has in relation to the genuine temporary entry requirement, but also the period of the stay. It's likely that you will be granted a visitor visa. As well, there may be bridging visas that tide you over until you're ready and able to leave Australia. Okay, so whatever you do, don't go unlawful. Okay, there are some questions that have appeared now, so I'll look to address some of those, and then in a moment I can talk more specifically about student visas. So Ashim has said, and I guess everyone can see it, what's it going to be like for those who have applied for a student visa and are unsure on the bridging visa? Will processing be on hold? No. So basically processing will continue in the ordinary course of events. It may slow down because the department will be moving resources internally to different parts of the department to deal with the response to the corona. But it doesn't. But processing will continue. If you're here on a bridging visa, it in effect doesn't matter. You can start your course, you can do everything and get on with your life as per normal, without that really being an issue. So I assume you don't have anything to worry about if that's your situation. Paulina asks, will this situation lead to permanent residence becoming easier? And the answer to that is no. The skilled visa and the migration program in general is more about demographics than reacting to instant situations. So it's looking about the long-term entry and migration into Australia of skilled people. The timeframes are years, not minutes. So it's unlikely that this coronavirus affair will result in easier pathways to migrate. Jackie asks about whether processing time for partner visas will be affected. And again, unlikely. I mean, those waiting times are quite extensive as they are. There might be some additional delay. Again, it's a question of resourcing for the department, but it's unlikely really to affect in any significant way the timeframes for processing partner visas. Darlene Castro asks, if someone is onshore and holds a tourist visa, with a maximum stay of 3 months, which is close to expiring, but cannot leave due to current travel restrictions, what is the Immigration Department's response? Well, in fact, the response will be to provide every flexibility to making a further visitor visa in that situation. And the discretion will be to do with the genuine temporary entry requirement. They're likely to be less strict on that, and also the period of the grant of that visitor visa. So that is one area where the department has said and indicated that it's prepared to be flexible and can be flexible as well under the Migration Act. Elizabeth, what about the subclass 300 visa? No, so that won't be affected by this as well. So family visas as well have a longer term time frame, and it's to do with supporting, well, Australians who then fall in love with someone from offshore. So basically that caseload will continue to be processed in the ordinary course of events without much change. And Jason asks, what about the subclass 482 visa? Will they be issued faster? Again, no, because that won't be affected. Again, this employer-sponsored visas are driven by the needs of the employers, and so the timeframes as well are different for those kinds of visas. Skilled visas, long-term. Employer-sponsored visas driven by the needs of Australian business. Family visas, sort of driven by the need to respect the wishes of Australian permanent residency citizens. So those three major sort of parts of visa processing are not likely to be affected by the corona. Okay, so Monica asks, what if I am overseas with a bridging visa B and I won't be able to enter before it expires? Can I apply to a visitor visa, and what will happen with my previous application? Yes, so as people may or may not know, if you've applied for in Australia for a visa, then you get granted a bridging visa that keeps you here lawfully until the decision is made on that visa. If you need to leave to go outside Australia, you need to apply for a bridging visa B, that is a travel permission. But those bridging visa Bs have a period of time within which you can re-enter. So the issue is, if you get caught outside Australia and can't come back in on that bridging visa B, then what you will need to do is to apply for another kind of visa. And that is likely to be a visitor visa. And then again, the Australian government is likely to exercise the discretions in your favour to facilitate that visa being granted. There can be some complications on that, because that visitor visa then may not have work rights. So people could be caught coming back into Australia on a visa that doesn't have work rights when that initial bridging visa did have work rights. So in that situation, I guess you would need to reapply for the bridging visa A with work rights, but that would only come into effect when the visitor visa expires. So there will be, and potentially could be, some ongoing complexities in relation to work rights for people caught in that situation. Okay, Luciana asked, does this ban have a time set? Well, in fact, all of this, who knows what's happening? Basically, I think it's just like a evolving situation, and if the spread of the infection can be controlled, then we're hoping that this special period will not be as significant as otherwise it might be, but this may go on for months, and we've got no special insight or knowledge as to how that is going to play out. Okay, so then Paulina asks about the ability to access superannuation, and there was a facility for people to be able to access up to $10,000 or $20,000 of their superannuation. So I guess that would be a question, particularly for the international students who may have been working and then may have, and other temporary resident visas as well, holders, but who may have money in the superannuation that you can't otherwise touch. And in your case, it may be appropriate to go back and, try to get hold of some of that money. So that's a good question, Paulina, and it is something that you should take up with your superannuation fund. Okay, so then Tanya asks what will happen with the student visa. and will the expiry date get extended? So basically, no, technically they cannot extend student visas. When your student visa expires, you have to apply for a new student visa. And if your course has been disrupted or paused, then you would need to go back and get a new confirmation of enrolment from the institution, and with that you then need to go back and apply for the new student visa. There is an issue of potentially the student visa application fee. If you've applied for a couple of visas before in Australia, you may need then to pay that or request an exemption. But those student visas that need to be applied for because of the coronavirus, again, I think that is where the department will exercise their discretion to allow the students to continue with their studies. Okay, so that is that is what the government's indicated. Okay, I'll get back to some discussion for the student visa holders now. So, of course, institutions have closed or paused their teaching activities, and also courses are going online. But the question is this what you've actually signed up for, and is this what you're paying for? So basically international students come into Australia in the expectation that they will have a very broad Australian experience and meet the lecturers, meet other people, learn what it's like to live in a sort of a modern Western country, improve your English, and a whole lot of benefits that come from student life based on campus. Suddenly, the universities are saying, well, no, we're not offering that, we're offering an online course. And well, if that's the case, you may well not have come, if that is what you're sort of getting at the end of the day. So, I mean, we've got a question as to whether you should actually take that up with the institution. And you could take it up in two ways, either to request a refund of part of your course fees. So if you're finding yourself in financial difficulty, and I guess a lot of the jobs that students are doing have been hit by the closures of hospitality and different industries. And if people find themselves in financial difficulty, you may want to go back to the institution and put it to them that they're not providing you with the course that they offered, and either seek a refund or alternatively a deferral of the course fee. What you should do is go back and review the letter of offer, because there is a contract that you have with the university, and there was terms and conditions, and just see what it might have said about this situation. Okay. The other thing that I'd like to draw your attention to is an organisation called the Council of International Students Australia, or CISA. I'll just put that here. So this is the peak organisation that in fact represents international students. So whether you know it or not, the job of the CISA is to represent your interests as international students to the Australian government, and they would then be formulating policies at the moment that about international students. And one of the issues that you may like to take up with them is whether there should be a refund of the fees that you've paid because you're not getting the course that you enrolled for, and or whether there should be a standard deferral of course fees given what's happening. Okay, so that's a that's a matter for you to take up with your own institution. Okay, another issue is whether international students and other temporary visa holders will be able to receive any kind of support from the Australian government. So what happened on that is that the last two nights ago, the Australian Parliament passed some legislation, and in that it gave permission or authority to the Minister for Social Security to extend a special benefit payment, it's called, to international students and other temporary visa holders. So there's been no decision yet as to whether payments will be made available to international students, or not, or whether it will be to a particular group of people who have been caught not being able to leave and not being able to work because you've lost your jobs. But I mean, that is a question that to follow, and one of the uncertainties of what is happening. I think, in my view, is that basically at the time that people came, you kind of committed yourselves to being able to pay the cost of living and the fees for the full period of the studies. But of course, circumstances have changed. But then again, whether the expectation is that you've run out of money that you'll leave, the Australian government may take a hard line on that, given the profitability and the need of that system to make money. Okay, one issue that you need to be aware of is that to meet the Australian study requirement and to then apply for a graduate visa or a skilled visa, you need to complete those studies from within Australia. So if you then decide to return home and keep studying online, then you won't in fact meet that Australian study requirement, and you won't be able to apply for the graduate visa or a skilled visa based on those studies. So that is something to take into account as you decide what you should do with this situation. In terms of relaxation of working conditions, so the government has said for people that are working in the supermarkets or in aged care that there will be a relaxation of the work hours. So basically you'll be able to work full time if you're working in a supermarket, Woolworths, Coles, or in distribution centres, or in aged care. The way that will work is that the employer will get a permission, and then with that you'll be able to work the additional hours. But it is really quite limited in applying to people in those jobs. The other thing that you could consider doing is deferring your studies, and again that would be a question for the institution. Okay, well, other questions, let's see.
Peter Waltz.
Peter, will this affect state nomination eligibility if schools are closed? Yeah, well, there is an issue about studying for 12 months as a way of triggering the application for state nomination. So if the schools are closed and you cannot complete your studies even on an online basis, then it may affect that. Here in Canberra, the ACT government has flexibly made some changes to its policy, because one of the requirements for applying for ACT nomination for the permanent visa, the subclass 190, is that you have lived in Canberra for 5 years. It was one of the pathways, but of course people may be caught outside Australia who then cannot satisfy that 5-year period. So it is created a policy exemption to permit those people to continue to apply if it's for being caught for reasons of the coronavirus. So, but I mean that is one of the issues with state nominations in general, that the policies can change fairly quickly. Okay, Rossmad, hi, how you going? What about the economic impact? This issue could impact new applications? I think there is a period of economic uncertainty that we're facing right across the world with respect to this situation. But as I said, the migration program in Australia has a longer term focus than just the next 6 months. And the employer-sponsored program as well has a different focus as to the family visa. So, I mean, from our perspective, and I think this is the correct view, that migration is going to continue. The department will continue processing applications, and it is business as usual on that front. And then what the situation is in a year or 2 years, well, who knows? Quién sabe, as they say in Spanish. Tanya says, this website's not working. Sorry, Tanya. That's a bit annoying. Wishy says, What will happen with people whose visa expires in September? Can we still apply for the 190, same as normal? Well, yeah, so again, that visa program will continue. It won't be impacted by the corona. Okay, well, then that is it. If there's further questions, please feel free to, well, put them down now. The other thing is you're welcome to call the Visa Australia helpline, and we're happy to have a conversation with you, try and understand what the particular circumstances you have and suggest the solution. The Australian government has said it will be flexible, particularly for people who are facing the possibility of going unlawful. So our view is that basically, apart from closing of the border, and there are some people caught by that, but in effect it's business as usual, the visa processing. There will be people caught in curious kinds of situations as this all sort of evolves, but people shouldn't be stressed. You shouldn't be worried by it. You shouldn't, people that are in Australia in particular, you should just get on with your lives. There is some flexibility by the Australian government, and there are solutions. And people who are outside Australia, well, again, the time frames are slow, and this interlude, say it's a 6-month interlude, well, it will end, and you'll be able to come and get on with your lives. Okay, so another question from Darling. Yes, some English tests, the PTE, have been suspended in Australia, and that's a good point actually, because yes, it's the same as overseas. People are not able to take the IELTS because the test centres are closed, and not and I guess it's the same here in Australia as well. I'm not sure whether at the moment you can have medical exams, because I think BUPA has closed its services. So that will be practical issues in terms of that next set of visa applications. So the department as well can be flexible on that, and to delay processing of applications if it is that you can't have the medical exam. Often with the English, it's an upfront requirement that you need to have those results before you apply for the visa. So it is an issue that you'll have to take into account with the timing of your application. No, and Paulina, if you need to leave the country, it won't affect any ongoing application for permanent residence. Just don't let yourself go unlawful, because that could affect your ability to come back in to the country later. No, and then Esperanza says, is it better to stop all processes right now and wait for everything to come back to normal? No, so the answer is a resounding no. No. Keep going with the process. This is a short-term blip, and it doesn't affect really the long-term nature of the migration program. And family visas or employer-sponsored visas, regional visas, that's all business as usual. Keep going on with the work of preparing your student visa application, and don't panic is the message. Right, well, I think that is it then. That's the question. So thank you for attending. I mean, I hope it was helpful. It is a very changing situation. Keep your eyes on what the Australian government is saying and doing, and I'm sure you are anyway. Stay safe, don't panic. If you've got particular questions about your visa, and this is particularly for that group of people who are in Australia and it's either running out of time with your current visa or it's affecting your visa strategy, please feel free to call us. We've got the free Visa Australia helpline. We'll try and understand your situation and refer you, say something sensible about what you should do, and with that we would wish you the best of luck with getting through the next 6 months. Okay, so thanks a lot for your attendance. I appreciate it. My name's Nick Houston. I'm the Director of Visa Australia, and we'll happy to keep working to assist you resolve the issues. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Bye.